Hello. In this video, I will introduce the first short chapter of the mathematical economic course. Chapter 1 gives you an overview of the discipline, which is production economics. Who uses it? In which context? How does it fit in the broader picture of economics discipline? How is it used? And why do we study it? So, for most of you, you already know what the discipline of economics is about because you probably took at least one or two economics classes. So, the study of economics is the study of how resources are used to satisfy the needs and desire of people. And we are talking here, people means all legal entities that can be individuals or businesses. So a business is a legal entity. We know that goods are available in limited supply. And one of the best example of limited supply is land, and more specifically, agricultural land. As population increases, for example, and the scarcity of land increases, price of land and housing increase too. So we assume in economics that all resources are scarce. And the objectives of economists is really to let use the resources, the scarce resources, those who are best able to optimize them. And so typically we are going to see, okay, who can, like a bidding, right? If you have a bidding and say, okay, who can um, build this house or this barn at the lowest cost and have exactly the same result. And so those who will gain or get that market are the firms or individuals who can build the barn, sorry, at the lowest cost. Or if I give you 1,000 acres of land, how much profit can you return on that land? And so if landowner bid and want to choose a manager to produce on that land, she will most likely choose the manager who says that he's able to produce the more profit. And so typically what we are trying to figure out is who can best and how can we best derive maximum benefit for a limited resource. And so I was talking about the objective earlier, the goal. The objective functions is a choice indicator. What choice do we want to make? Do we want to maximize profit? Do we want to maintain the quality of the land? Do we want to improve that land? And so, the choice indicator of the objective functions is not always profit maximization, but most of the time is a simplification. It's easier to deal with profit maximization because it's all data and numbers. So there are different types of economics, and you all know the difference between micro and macroeconomics. But we also talk about dynamic and static. And here in this class is important to understand the difference. Dynamic takes time into considerations. Okay, we can be certain or uncertain about some variables that are being considered. For example, if we include in our model the temperature or the quantity of sunlight or the quantity of rain, all those variables are totally uncertain. Nobody controls how much you are going to have of it. And so we are going to include those variables are uncertain variables as random variable. That's the term that we use most of the time. They are random, they are unpredictable. But of course, that's usually the second step of developing a model. Usually, and specifically at this level, we are going to assume that time does not matter and everything is known. We know how much rain we are going to have, how much sunlight we are going to have, etc., etc. if we were to include those variables into our production models. But usually here, at this level, we will not include random variable. We will talk and deal with usually with different inputs, the physical input that are used to produce resources. You also have positive and normative economics, and that's about really economists and positive statement attempt to describe the world as it is. And so usually we observe data collection. When you collect data, the result is what you have. If you have 3% economic growth, it's difficult to dispute that. But normative statements can be disputed. It's the attempt to describe the world as it should be. So, for example, among the presidential advisor, the economists who advise the president, there might be two camps. One camp will say, well, in order to, in the long run, benefit our farmers, we are going to engage in a trade war, and the cost will be short term and limited in time. But after that, we'll be in a stronger position and we are going to sell more. And over will say, well, we don't know how long the trade war will last. This is not a good idea. Let's use different tools to achieve our goals. And so it's okay. What do we want to do, and how should we do it? Or should we just do a trade war at all? What are our goals? And so they can have different opinion about what should be. Now, that is about economics. The discipline of agricultural economics falls into the bigger umbrella of economics. And so agricultural economics in most land grant universities, that means the universities that receive most grant resources from the federal government, and those will be usually your state universities. In New Mexico is New Mexico State University. You have a department of agricultural economics. And in that department, you have a number of professors with discipline specialties. And so agriculture economists look at agriculture through all the angles. They look at the marketing aspect of it, finance, productions, management, environment, transportation, logistic, etc., etc. You also, for example, have an expert in agricultural law, and that is a big field because there are a lot of regulations in agriculture. Um, Agricultural economics is as theoretical as it is applied, but is typically more applied than it is theoretical. So the goal of agricultural economics is to study and research means to increase producers' efficiency and profitability. That's really what we are trying to do. Now, within agricultural economics, you have the discipline of production economics. And so the bigger umbrella is economics, the discipline. And under that umbrella, you have agricultural economics. And under that umbrella, you have production economics, the discipline that we will be studying here. So what is production economics? It's the application of the principle of economics in agriculture. It clarifies the concept of cost, output response to input, and the use of resources to maximize profit. And so what we'll be, doing here a lot is to understand, um, given a number of inputs, or how much output can we produce, and how does that output changes as we increase input or reduce input, for example. In more complicated models, we are going to look at how does the output changes if you are changing, alternating on different input to see which one will be the most profitable. So that discipline obviously should be extremely useful to farm managers seeking to increase profitability and also efficiency, because usually you can do both. So production economists collaborate with other disciplines such as agronomists, soil scientists, etc., etc. I was trained as a production economist. And so in my research, I worked extensively with agronomists. I work extensively with engineers to, for example, assess the costs of running a combine. Okay, what is the exact cost, fixed and variable cost for running a combine? Engineers will give you the technical details of, if you drive 1 hour, how much oil do we have to change, of course, over time, how much fuel you burn, and what will be the depreciation. And so usually we count the use of large equipment in hours of use. So, of course, you have to work with agronomists to understand the productivity and the characteristics of the different type of soil that you're modeling. And so you can model different type of soil to understand, well, given the cost, et cetera, which one can be most profitable. So you have clay soil, sandy soil, etc. It's also the study of productions economics, studying the production process. Okay, how does the production process works? The theory of production begins by classifying inputs into three general categories. So most of you already know that we have variable input, fixed input, and as I was telling earlier here, what we add is random input, and the random inputs are again, data and inputs such as weather, rain, etc. And also price. Price of output is a random input because you have to consider the price of the output to know the quantity of output that you should be producing to maximize profit. And the price of output is totally random most of the time and for most commodities. So the economist makes a series of assumptions to delineate the nature of a production response under study. The assumptions are to enable the economist to eliminate the effect of some variable while studying the production response of other variables. So it will be near impossible to take into account all the variables that need to be accounted for in the production process. So, for example, if you want to build a perfect model, you need to know what is the density of life within 50 inches or 1 feet, 1 foot of land. Do you have a lot of worms? You don't have enough. And so all that will predict what yield you should be expecting. You need to know the exact capacity of the land to absorb, to keep, or to let go. Fertilizer applications such as potassium, okay, or nitrogen, and you have to have all that information. That's a lot of information to include. You need to understand what are the consumer preferences for this crop. You need to have information about what the expectations of export of that crop to predict the world price. of that commodity, etc. And so basically, it's just too much information to possibly want to include all the details of the production process and the output and price of the output. And so we have to make assumption to simplify our model, and we assume that in a given period of time, very little changes in the production process. Technology, for example, is a big component in agricultural production, and we assume that technology is constant. In reality, technology for farmers can change from one year to the next. For example, the seed that they use biotechnology right now is basically technology embodied in the seeds, in grains, and from year to year, the seed that they obtain can have different characteristics, different yields, different resistance to disease. All those things are different technologies. And so we can't consider all of them. So we choose one and we assume that it does not change. Then to simplify presentations of a concept, we draw the production functions as smooth, well-behaved curves. In reality, they are not. But again, it's for the visual aspect of representation of the concepts. We also assume perfect certainty in initial models, and I explained that earlier. We assume that we know everything that will happen, and we don't include any randomness. It's later that we include random variables, but of course, we will not be dealing with random variables here in this course. Finally, we assume the assumptions is required to deal with time. And so time is a random aspect, but here we look at the financial aspect of it. And so in any data that you create, okay, you have to include, if you're using expected income, for example, if you are looking at a 5-year project, you have to just include discounting and discount the receipt, right, that will be received in 3 or 4 years and discount it to today's money. That's with data collections process and stuff. And again, here is not something that we'll be using that much. The role of economic theory in the production process. Economic logic represents an abstraction developed to simplify the real world. And to simplify, we apply a lot of restrictions and we make a lot of assumptions as described earlier. So the goal of production economics are to understand how production reacts to various exogenous factors, changes such as technology, price, consumers' demand, all those things I was talking about. In very sophisticated models, you see all those factors included in the model. But at this level, obviously, we look at just 2 or 3 variables, it would be super simplified. But once you understand the basic concepts, then you can extrapolate most of the time. And so agricultural economics really assists farmers, managers to best use resources, to develop production techniques and procedures, and better know the quantity of inputs that they need to include in order to get better result. And so we model all that and we can come with some types of recommendations. And so, so here we deal with the rule of optimizations, okay? You'll have an objective function that is profit, but it can be something else, okay? It can be something else. And a simple problem could be when there is only one product produced with little risk and uncertainty, and also with only very few inputs. The goals now of production economics, that discipline, is also to assist policymakers, right? And that is quite important because in many countries, for example, some crops or some inputs are subsidized. So basically, the government helps to reduce the price of those inputs or outputs, or those inputs, increase the price of output that farmers receive, regardless of the market price. And so, for example, for cotton productions, the government intervenes to increase farmers' revenue if the price of cotton is way too low. So that help farmers continue to produce some good in the market. Evaluate the use of the theory of a firm for improving farm management and understanding the behavior of a farm as a profit maximizing entity. So, with production economics, we help farmers to better understand which input more likely to be more profitable and when they are more likely to be profitable. So we take into account the different prices of the input, the quality of the input, etc., etc. So we can model all those things. Of course, the economists also help evaluate the effects of technical and institutional changes. When technology changes, we need to know how that new technology impacts the production process and profitability. And that was personally the subject of my dissertation, where I concentrated on the profitability of precision agriculture, but I'll also look at the institutional aspect of it and the financial aspect of it, right? How does it affect your finances to invest in your new production systems? How long will it take you to recover that investment, and will it be profitable, and how and why? So to almost conclude here, I would say that the economic setting we analyze is the analysis of farm businesses the analysis of farm businesses can be divided into three parts. One is the characteristics of the market in which the firm purchases its inputs. We can assume that that market is competitive, perfectly competitive, or not competitive. A lot of the time, the input market will not be that competitive because there are typically mostly a few companies, large conglomerate that produce the inputs that farmers use, whether it's fertilizer, pesticide, or seed. The technology and economic characteristics of a production process within the firm. And so we look at the nature of costs within the firm, the profit, and so on. So the nature of cost will be different from farm to farm. Some farm will have a high cost of land. For some farmers, they inherit the land. They don't have to pay any mortgage on the land. And how do all those aspects can affect ultimate profitability? In the output market, a lot of agricultural output are commodities. They are homogeneous, not different from each other. And so we assume that the output markets, however, it's a perfectly competitive market. And so farmers sell in a perfectly competitive market. That means that they don't control the price of the good that they produce. And so that's understanding those concepts. That's where we are going to be starting here. Next, we'll be talking about, we'll be studying the appendix 1. And in that appendix, we're talking about derivatives and review about how to derive functions. Thank you, and I will see you next time.